So I get to introduce Sugar, the real Sugar. Woo. And so I'll just tell you quickly kind of how the column came to be. In 2008, in December, Stephen Elliott, beloved to all of us, decided to start the Rumpus. And I said, well, you know, I think you should have an advice column, and I think I should be the advice columnist. I love getting drilled by hot Cubans. And that qualifies me. And so, and I decided that we should call the column Dear Sugar Butt. That was the original name because Stephen and I, this is not going to sound good, the endearment that we used in emails was Dear Sugar Butt. Having nibbled on one another's butts and found them sugary. So we mercifully shortened that to Dear Sugar. And I wrote, as you could hear, I wrote some columns for about, you know, a little bit less than a year. And after a time I realized that I was kind of assuming this persona. It was sort of funny, but I was probably better to do work kind of under my own name and also work that was more honest. And so that's how I wanted to contribute to the Rumpus. But I wanted the column to continue, and I had a feeling that there was somebody who could really do something with it. And in fact, I had a person in mind who I'd met, we were sort of literary acquaintances. I'd read her fiction, and it was spectacular. And then I'd been reading her nonfiction, and I read a couple of essays in particular, and they were just so beautiful, and such luminous, forgiving prose, so incredibly honest. And so I decided to ask this person, but I knew that she was married. I knew she was trying to make a living as an artist with a husband who was an artist. I knew she had 2 small kids and a mountain of debt. So it was kind of a ridiculous thing to say, hey, would you like to write a free, you know, a column for no money for a website? Like, well, what a gig! But I decided to ask her, and I had an ace in the hole. And the ace in the hole was that I'd received as Sugar, about 1 fan letter. But it was from the real Sugar. She didn't know she was writing me, but I did. And that was just awesome to get that letter anyway. It was a very Sugar thing to do. Right? So I asked her, and to my amazement, she said yes. It was immediately apparent to me from reading her columns that she was going to do it in a completely different way, and in the way that I hoped that the column would be written. And I can remember the column that made it clear that she was really born to do this. It was a young guy who wrote in, this was his question, WTF, question mark. I'm not even going to fucking bother to spell out the words. And I know that as Sugar, my Sugar response would have been to fucking tear him a sugary asshole, like, what are you doing? And her response was breathtaking. She wrote in very unvarnished prose about an act of senseless cruelty that she had absorbed as a young girl at the hands of her grandfather. I was in tears by the end of it. I'm not going to ask you to raise your hand if you cried during a Sugar column, because we all have. Yeah. And it wasn't an attempt to lecture this kid. It was an attempt to say with great gentleness, look, life isn't some game played on the internet. Unspeakable sorrow comes into all of our lives, insoluble griefs. And you either face them and face the chaos of your internal life, or you just skim over the surface. She said it a lot more eloquently, but that was what she was trying to teach him. And in a sense, it was so revolutionary because the advice column as a literary form, or just as a form of writing, is so conventional. The advice columnist is omnipotent, they know everything, they're sort of invulnerable, they're oddly impersonal because they have all the answers, and you come and apply to them for the wisdom to figure it out, and they sort of dispense the necessary bromides, and we pretend that the issue is resolved when the little column ends. And what Sugar realized is, actually, I'm as fucked up as you are, and as confused and bereft and stuck and lost. And I'm going to confess that to you, and furthermore, try to compel you to realize that we don't get through those parts of our lives, the unbearable parts, until we look at them honestly and move through them rather than dodge around them. And it's significant to me that sugar and Dear Sugar is an internet phenomenon, because the internet is a place we go, it's a place I go when I'm feeling needy and lonely and aggrieved. And it is, for the most part, not entirely, but for the most part, it's filled with people who are snarky and resentful and getting off on Schadenfreude, all the modern sports of distraction. And what they're really doing is lying. They're angry and troubled, and they can't be honest about that, and they can't face themselves, so they're cruel to somebody else. And Sugar really intuited that what we need is just the opposite of that. That we need a place, a kind of community or an oasis where radical empathy is enforced. Right? And the beauty of that is that people need that so badly. They need that place that they're willing to slough the smaller parts of themselves to be a part of that. And it cuts across all financial, social, racial, economic barriers just to be a part of that community. It's like the one no bullshit zone on the internet. Even the comment section is sort of this community where everybody agrees that it's about being real, about fucking getting real, about what life is about, the difficult parts. She ministers to people. I mean, that's a weird word to use, but that's what she does. Her concerns and sensitivities are really the same as Christ in the Sermon on the Mount. That's essentially what he was saying. Don't sit there in your seat and pretend that the person next to you is less human than you are, because that's how you become less human. It's a really simple and kind of beautiful message. The other thing, so she has built, I think, this real community. I want to call it following, that sounds weird, but a community around that pursuit. The idea that you have to really face what's going on inside you, and you have to not turn away. That love is the first, and paying attention is the first and final act of love. Not turning away from people when they're unlovable, and not turning away from yourself when you're having to face parts of yourself that are unlovable. To me, it's been amazing to watch that community grow, but it's also been a little bit, I've had mixed feelings about it, because knowing Sugar, knowing the real Sugar, she's had the following and the support and the love, but she has to absorb a great deal of pain. And I remember talking with her on the phone one time and sort of saying, how's it going as Sugar? People love the column, but how's it going? And I remember her just saying to me, there's just so much pain out there. People are just really in a lot of pain and lonely and confused. And it is overwhelming. And so for me, it feels like tonight is it's not just an honor and a pleasure to be able to reveal who Sugar really is. We already know, in a sense. But, it's a kind of obligation to finally give credit where it is due and overdue to the person who not only writes that column, but, by the way, also has to pursue her own writing under her own given name, and be a loving wife to a wonderful and endlessly patient husband, and a loving mother to her two beautiful kids. It's a tough thing to be a mother to so many people. And I think motherhood is the most underappreciated job that anybody could have. I know that from my own mother and everything she did, and didn't really hear that she should have heard from us over the years, and also my beautiful wife, mother of my children. So the time has come, as Etta James would say, at last. Couldn't be more delighted to introduce an amazing writer, actually two amazing writers. A good friend, my sweet sister, personal hero, the real Sugar, Miss Cheryl Strayed.